So on the eve, right before the eve, where I go to the Fish concert, I decided to revisit my AirPods Pro 3s, which I have really not been wearing much because even though I found that when originally my comfort level with them was awful compared to the Pro 2s, a lot of people have had similar issues. A lot of people, they fit great. The moral of the story is they fit differently from the 2s. And so you're kind of rolling the dice, and they might be better on you, they might be worse, they might be no different. And I had found, and I mentioned on the show, based on a listener's tip, that if you actually wear larger ear tips than you think you should, it makes them more comfortable. Well, as is always the case, if you mention, web browsers in the early 2000s and some feature, you would inevitably hear from the two people who use Opera. And they'd be like, Opera does this really well, or Opera's had this feature forever.
Right, what is the Opera of noise-canceling earbuds?
Yeah, right.
The Opera of noise-canceling earbuds, and in particular how they fit, is people who use the Comply foam tips.
I think they are way more popular than Opera.
Probably. But whenever you mention however AirPods fit you, you will always hear from 2 or 3 people saying, I only use the Comply tips. They're the best. You should just use those. They fix all of my problems. Well, this is the first time I've ever tried them. They're the best. They fixed all my problems.
Oh, no.
Are we just like history eraser buttoning the thing where you bought the AirPods 3, then returned them, then bought them again? Are we just pretending that didn't happen now?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Because Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Well done. Reference acknowledged.
Yeah. So I got the Comply tips. They came out, I think a few weeks ago. They came out fairly recently. I've been wearing them all day, and they are, I think, great. So compared to just wearing a larger set of tips from Apple, they seem to be a little bit softer.
Compliant even.
Yes, and they feel a little more secure. Like the main downside of upsizing the tips from Apple is that it makes them sit less securely in my ears. It does make them more comfortable, but it makes them sit less securely. The Comply tips seem to have fixed that problem as well. I'll report back if this changes over time. I should also point out that they have a couple of different variants. The one I have is the True Grip Max with smart skin technology, which sounds like a condom but isn't. It's this really nice, foam finish. It's a few bucks more than their, I guess, base model, but it's good. I enjoy it. Give it a try. If you have AirPods Pro 3s and they were uncomfortable for you, and you upsize the tips or found some other trick that is not quite 100% working for you, give the Comply tips with the True Grip Max Smart Skin a try.
That does sound very naughty, but I'm glad that it's worked out for you. So when we saw each other in October, if memory serves, you were rocking the AirPods Pro 2 at that point. So
yes.
Is your intention for future concert viewings to wear the 3 then, I assume?
So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to the Fish concert for New Year's Eve tomorrow, first time ever seeing a New Year's show live. So that'll be really fun, I hope. But what I'm going to do, I'm not so confident that I would bring only the AirPods Pro 3s. So I'm just going to bring both. I'm going to have one in each pocket and just, I'm going to start with the 3s, see how far I get.
All right, let's do some follow-up, and let's talk about contacts. And I'm not talking about lenses. I'm talking about people that you know in your phone. So Dayton Lowell writes, regarding Marco's request for an archive contacts option, although that feature doesn't exist, you can go the other way. The Contacts app supports lists. I have a common contacts list that I always keep selected. It remembers across app launches. The only downside is that it's hard to build this list. There's no mass select option within the full list. You have to go into each contact individually and scroll to the bottom and select add to list. That sounds freaking awful to do. I mean, I'm not saying the end state isn't worth it, but it sounds awful to do it. I wonder, and I'm not going to try while we're live, but I wonder if the Mac Contacts app would allow for this and do a little better.
Yeah, I would see these questions and I'm immediately suspicious. I'm like, that can't possibly be true of the Mac app. Maybe on a cruddy phone app, but these days... I wouldn't put anything past Mac apps that have no support for multi-selection or whatever. So I don't mean to doubt Dayton, but yeah, I would try the Mac app to see if it will let you multi-select. And, you know, the iOS app should let you multi-select and change things too, but I have an easier time believing that one won't. But yeah, that's a possible option if you can keep things straight and if it really does remember your selected list across all apps in the contact picker.
See, the downside, though, so we've had a few people write in with the solution, and with the solution basically like make a list that is not everyone, and have that list just stay selected as the active list, like in the navigation of the Contacts app, and that will do what we want for archived contacts when looking at that list, but it won't affect any other part of the system. So you'll still have contacts that you don't really want to see all the time. You'll still have them show up in search. You'll still have Siri try to call them sometimes. You'll still have like autocomplete show them up in message composition windows and stuff like that. So like it achieves one part of the reduction in immediate visibility that I'm seeking with an archived contact, but it does not achieve most of them. And it still makes it way too easy to accidentally, place a phone call to a coworker from 10 years ago or an ex-partner or somebody who has died. And it's just like all these situations where, again, like you don't really want to necessarily delete the contact forever and never be able to contact them and have all their past communication just turn into a phone number. Like you don't necessarily want to do that, but you don't want it to be one tap away or one misheard Siri command away from all of a sudden calling or messaging this person. So I still think the need exists for archived contacts in some form. And this is a very small step towards that. You can kind of hack it, but it doesn't go far enough for what I actually want.
Real-time follow-up, the Mac Contacts app does indeed let you make multiple selections, then drag them into a list.
There you go. The computer is always better, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Continuing with contacts-related things, Paul writes, with regard to harmonizing contacts between family members, there's also a deeper data privacy question that any such system would have to manage. A simple example is a family of 4, a mom, a dad, a son, and a daughter. If they share their contacts with each other, are they sharing their My Card profile? And whose nickname has primacy? The mother usually isn't mom to the father, but the kids might have different nicknames for each other. So is one kid Kid 1 or Snot Nose? One solution might be to allow each person to have their own versions of fields. I do have some thoughts about contacts data management for single users. Sometime after I got an iPhone, I started to archive expired contact info. If someone, including me, moved, got a new email or a new phone number, I'd copy their old info into the notes field and then update the appropriate field. Were you and your partner or family member to apply this archival technique, you can immediately tell who is up to date because the notes field will have the older address, email, or phone. If no one else has the version you have, but they have a version that's in your notes, then you have the most up-to-date version. As a quick aside about this, I should have prefaced this and I forgot. I really enjoy this feedback because this is a great example of, oh, surely that's easy, isn't it? And so much in computer programming is, well, you would think so, but, and this is a great example. And even something as simple as, what's my card? Granted, that one's fairly simple to figure out, but I think an even better example perhaps is the nicknames thing. Like, do you carry the nickname across cards? Maybe you do for some, maybe you don't for others. How does the user indicate that? These are solvable problems for sure, but, and I'm getting off on a tangent. Hi, we're the Accidental Tech Podcast. But anyways, I thought this was a fascinating case study in it's never as easy as you think it is.
I'm going to make you put a quarter in a jar every time you put the in front of the name of this podcast.
Also, the idea that other people in your life, whether it's your family or any coworkers, whatever it is, the idea that you would trust them to manage and pollute your contact database.
You're speaking my language.
Like, I feel like I'm in good company here, both the two of you and our listeners. We, I suspect, have better contact semantic discipline than many people out there. Like, when you see someone else's phone and you see the names they've given contacts, first of all, no one has a last name, or their last name is like Plumber. It's like, oh, it's Jim Plummer's calling.
They don't know how to use the company field at all, ever.
Right. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, no one has. It's like when we would be really careful tagging our MP3s back in the day, like making sure we had the track number, all these, have everything correct. No one exercises that discipline with contacts. And if they, even if they know how to use these things, a lot of times they'll use it as a form of, poking fun at their siblings. Their sister would be like, butt face or whatever. Like it's.
I still would like a shared pool. Because I would trust my wife and I to share a pool of like the people we know, like extended family, because it's just so frustrating for us to have double ones. And Paul's suggestion of like essentially implementing your own revision control system by every time a field changes, copying the field down to the notes field with like, this used to be the last name : right? I mean, that will work, but like, geez, like that's what we have computers for. And to Casey's point, implementing this is not hard on the back end, but making a UI for it that is understandable to people, boy, that's the hard problem. Like that's very often the case. Like, because context, as I've harped on many times before, the volume of data is just ridiculously low by modern computer standards. Like no matter how many contacts you have, it's just a bunch of text fields, maybe one photo for each one. Like it is nothing compared to like your photo library, even in these days, your messages library, or anything like that. It's a small amount of data. We can sync it and have it, like we have the technology to do all that, but how do you present the UI that lets you say, okay, well, mom's contact card is shared with the whole family, but the kids call her mom, but dad doesn't call her mom. So how do you provide per field overriding in the UI on a phone in a way that makes sense to people? And to Marco's point, people can't even just use the straight up, like this is a bunch of fields in your own contacts that aren't shared with anybody. They don't even populate those. The worst one is obviously two-factor, which I think a lot of tech nerds have like a single contact called like two-factor authentication. They add them all to that, right? Versus just a million random phone numbers that are constantly sending you two-factor codes. Hopefully this will go away someday if we all move to passkeys or whatever. But like in the meantime, just scroll through somebody's messages list and look at how many like completely unlisted two-factor numbers are just in there junking up the list. Whereas if you combine them all into a single contact, that becomes a one message thread. Again, if Messages is able to merge things.
I have never tried this. This is a really good idea.
You got to do that. Yeah. I'm wondering, eventually I'm going to hit the limit. Like Connex is going to be like, sorry, you can't add any more phone numbers to the contact. But so far I haven't hit it. So I have a contact called two-factor authentication or two-factor verification. I forget. It's got like a lock icon and it's got a hojillion telephone numbers associated with it. And anytime I get a two-factor code, it goes into a single message thread in Messages under that contact. And if I get one that's a bare phone number, add to existing contact. You'd be surprised how often they reuse numbers. You might think, oh, it's a different number every time. It's not. I've had numbers in there for like the two-factor authentication for some random thing that's been there for years, and it always comes from the same apparent number.
That is a really good idea. I feel like we talked about this before, and then I forget about it by the time we're done recording.
Yeah, I tried to do it on my kids' contact, but of course they rebelled and said, please don't do that to my thing. So, all right, because, I'm their dad.
Pablo Rodrigo writes, you can display contacts from multiple accounts, iCloud, Gmail, IMAP, etc., in the Contacts app. This creates multiple contacts from the same person, but then you can link them to appear as one. And when you change some info in one of them, it updates every single linked account. This solves John's iCloud Gmail situation. Also, creating a linked intermediary shared account for you and your partner to sync selected contacts can act as a way of keeping contact info in sync between two people's address books. Finally, you can create an archived Gmail account exclusively for storing contacts you no longer want in your main iCloud contacts. They will keep syncing to your devices, but if you select just your iCloud account in the usually hidden left pane, they will remain out of sight and out of mind.
Except with Siri and autocomplete.
Yeah. Using like the Gmail, Google contacts along with iCloud contacts and stuff. The reason I don't do that, I think I did it way back in the day and decided to undo it, is because Google in the Gmail app, I believe because it's configured by default, and I don't know if there's a setting to change this, will add stuff to your contacts for you based on whoever emails you. And I like that feature. I want that feature, but it also means my Google contacts are just a giant cesspool of like everyone who's ever emailed me, right? And again, I like that to be there because I like to have a list of essentially everyone who ever emailed me so I can look up like I don't want to disable that, but I would never allow that to mix in with my iCloud stuff for that very reason, because it's just filled with junk. So I'm currently happy with the separation that I have there. Again, as I said when we talked about this last episode, it doesn't actually bother me. As for creating the intermediary shared account, I think our friend Todd Vaziri did this at one point, if I remember correctly. Like, basically you have an Apple ID, your spouse has an Apple ID, then you get a third Apple ID that's neither one of you, and you put the shared contacts in that one. And similarly, like making like a Google account just for your archived contacts. Like, these are all hacks of various ways around. Like it's kind of like Photos shared library thing. There were ways to try to hack around that as well. But I'm perfectly happy having waited a decade for them to just implement it, because it's so much better when they just implement it themselves. And it does more or less what I want. So hopefully someday they'll get to that with contacts. I can't believe they did it for photos before contacts, but I guess maybe it's a bigger team on photos.
Face ID and Touch ID. Harrison Krebs writes, old people's Touch ID issues are real. My grandparents went through it with their iPhone SE, third generation, a week ago. I had to help them go in and remove their fingerprints and re-add them because they stopped working. No idea if they could make it better. Kurt Schwind writes, I can confirm that old people's fingerprints stopped working. I spent 40 minutes with my 80-year-old mother trying to get her fingerprint login working with her new phone. She got a new one because the old one stopped working with her fingerprints. Dope. It didn't work on the new one either. I tested her out on my iPad, and it was the same thing. You hit a certain age, and these readers just don't work anymore. Finally, Rob Sayre writes, I've had to work on stuff like Face ID and Touch ID before. These things are likely using your habits and purchase history to decide how strict to be. Face ID will accept basically anything, unshaven, sloppy, not myself, if I've been to the place many times before. It's the same as what Stripe does for fraud detection. It makes sense if you treat the phone login data as part of a fraud detection ML strategy, like what Stripe does online. Surely not all Face ID logins can have the same certainty score, so it seems like they are looking for other signals as well, but they'll never talk about how that works in public, so it'll be interesting to hear whether other listeners report it.
Yeah, I asked Rob about this. Is like, you're just speculating based on your past experience? He said, yeah, he doesn't know for a fact that Apple does this, but that would be an interesting strategy to essentially be looser on Face ID. If you're Face IDing in like a location or at a time, or like, there are lots of other input into the system besides just your face scan. My inclination is to think that Apple doesn't get any more lenient with Face ID and Touch ID based on other factors, but I don't know for a fact either. So anyone at Apple has any inside info to at least let us know whether they do change the strictness of biometric authentication based on other factors. You don't have to tell us the secret sauce or whatever, but I would love to know if that's true.
Yeah, even stuff like, Apple Watch proximity, like, that works the other direction. Does it also work that way? And, probably the answer is like they tried it once and there's some reason why. Like, anything involving the iPhone security model, it's super complicated. There are super sophisticated attacks all the time that people try and that Apple has to protect against. And so, anything that we're thinking of like, oh, maybe they just can they just like reduce the security in this one case? Like, the answer probably is they can't because of, vulnerability X. Like, somebody could then do this, this, and this, and that would, weaken your security.
Right, GPS spoofing or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, like there's all, like the iPhone threat landscape is vast. And so Apple, takes it extremely seriously and I think has a very good track record overall, of keeping the iPhone secure. But like a lot of this stuff is like, okay, the reason why it, times out after a certain amount of X is because if you didn't, then you could have this, police thing could break in. Like there's all these different, attack vectors that Apple has to protect against with the iPhone. And, the risk of getting it wrong for them is so high that they play it pretty conservatively. And that's probably the right move. That being said, I still would love a phone that offered me Touch ID and Face ID, and whichever one succeeds first, I could configure it to let me in that way. And even if I accept reduced security, that's probably still better than making it so difficult that everybody makes the passcodes 1212.
Well, I hope you get that within the next 30 years, because this was just two of the many pieces of feedback we got saying old people not being able to use Touch ID is 100% a real thing. So it's not just my parents. Many, many people wrote in to confirm this. Clock's ticking on all of us and all of our fingers and our saggy skin.
See, in 30 years, I'll move to a secluded island where I can set my passcode to 1212, and it won't be that big of a problem because nobody will ever see me enter it.
You could just disable your passcode if you're on a secluded island.
Yeah, but with no passcode, a bunch of stuff doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
All right, friend of the show, Guy Rambo, writes with regard to John's liquid glass bug in macOS 26.2. Guy writes, I have a workaround for the liquid glass issue you mentioned on ATP, but it involves overriding or swizzling a private method on NS Window with the melting emoji. Maybe there's a way to do it without this hack. The important thing to keep in mind is that this can be influenced by the configuration of your window or panel, not just your SwiftUI views or the system. So John has provided for the show notes a link to the PR that Guy opened. Geek continues, it looks to me like Apple changed the way SwiftUI materials behave, so they no longer render in an active state unless the app is active and the window is rendering with an active appearance. This is fine for most regular app windows, but it doesn't work for helper apps like SwitchGlass. I tried SwiftUI's material active appearance modifier with the active option, but that didn't work.
And as I noted last time, it also doesn't work for things like the dialog box that comes up and says, are you sure you want to restart? Because that has exactly the same properties of, not being the active window because it doesn't belong to any specific app, but it is translucent and you can't see things from behind it. So anyway, this is just a bug. They need to fix it, hopefully. No movement on my feedback. The pull request is to my sample project. So I filed feedback and made a sample project, and I asked Guy to provide a pull request against that sample project that fixes it, and he did. That's great. I did actually adapt the code that he provided to provide a more targeted fix for my actual app. And so now there is an updated version of SwitchGlass that works around the bug in 26.2. The glass is glassing again.
All right. And then speaking of Guy, he also provided some feedback with regard to the podcast app and how it's like randomly loading stuff. So Guy writes, there's definitely something weird with how Apple Podcasts does things in the background. In AirBuddy 3, which is currently in beta, I use the private Media Remote API to be able to show now playing information in the app's widgets. I've had quite a few occurrences of the podcast app randomly popping up in the now playing information coming from that API on my Mac, even though I pretty much never use Apple Podcasts and had not used it recently before the incident. It happens more often when I have had some other app like music playing than quit the app. Instead of going back to an empty state, the Media Remote API just decides that Apple Podcasts is the new now playing app. Cool.
Yeah, that the whole audio now playing management stack it's full of a bunch of exceptions to things. Like the system has all these different ways to manage different apps and how they're visible and how they're running and what they have access to and how do you show updates to what is playing, and you have to update something in Control Center like once a second, and nothing else can really do that. And so they have special functionality for audio apps that the now playing app. And so there's all these different APIs around this and all this different system functionality around it that is basically little exceptions to the way things usually work for everything else, to achieve common audio functionality that people want. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there are little areas like this where there's some bug possible because Apple made an exception for one of their apps at some point to achieve this functionality. Now, to Apple's credit, the vast majority of audio functionality that hooks into all this stuff is actually public APIs. That's why Overcast and other audio apps can hook into that. When Overcast plays audio, it gets the same treatment in Control Center as the Apple Music app. And Apple Podcasts and everything else. There's not that many areas of those APIs that are still private to Apple. There are some, but there's not many. But also, all of those areas of code are really old.
Yep.
They're all super old, Objective-C based, dictionary based APIs, a lot of casting things to NS number and stuff like that. A lot of that kind of stuff going on with those APIs. A lot of old C and C++ code that you might occasionally see in call stacks or have to call into. It's a very old API, and a lot of it dates back to when Springboard, the iOS kind of window system base, whatever, when Springboard was one giant monolith and it's super complicated. A lot of it dates back to those old days. And so this is very old code that's full of special cases and exceptions and behaviors that don't work the same way everything else in the system does. When you combine this with so many new APIs they've added over time, things like NS user activity, or widget updates even, or things like universal links and how those are handled, I'm sure there's all sorts of potential for in some really rare case, this number value can be stuck in this dictionary and can be interpreted by this daemon in the system to actually mean this. I'm sure there's stuff like that. Working in the audio app space, there's a lot of problems that audio apps don't have to deal with. For instance, most background execution. When your app is playing audio in the background, you can just run in the background infinitely. You can do whatever you want in the background. You don't have a lot of restrictions there, so it's great. And you can do stuff like integrate with the system in these weird ways, like to show up in Control Center and stuff. Like some of that stuff is actually really nice as an audio app author. The downside of being an audio app author is that the complexity of all those APIs and behaviors of the system, all of the problems created by that complexity become your problem, even though they're not your fault, and even though you often have no control over them. All of that, and also for whatever reason, Apple changes the behaviors of those audio subsystems a lot. Like almost every point update to the OS, there's some change to like, oh, now, AirPlay switching is slightly tweaked and now it breaks in this weird circumstance. Or, there's some weird bug in the Control Center audio player if you set this value to this. Like, the Apple tweaks that a lot. And it's like kind of at random with different OS versions and not like all just at once in the summer version. And so you kind of are along for this wild ride that gives you some insight into the massive complexity of how iOS integrates with audio apps. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of weird complexity there. And somehow the Apple Podcast app is finding itself opening in weird ways at weird things to at weird times. Like, given that it operates in that environment, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I find that the picking what to play next, like let's say you plug in not plug in, but you put in your AirPods and you hit play, and sometimes it'll be like, yes, I will go back to the thing that you were just doing, and it's like magic, God. And it works great. But oftentimes it either straight up refuses or plays something that you haven't interacted with in like a day. I'm being hyperbolic, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's just it's either perfect or the kookiest selection you can come up with. It's very, very unusual. That
exact problem of like, I played Overcast an hour ago, then I went and did other stuff. Now I just put my AirPods back in and I click the stem to play. What should play? Overcast should play if it was your last played audio app.
Yep.
But okay, that one thing, anybody at Apple, I would love any help with this. Before the big Overcast rewrite last summer, two summers ago now, before that big rewrite, Overcast would be picked to play next in that context way more often than it is now. I have combed over the code before and after the rewrite, trying to figure out what that could be possibly have been relevant to that has changed. I've looked at the IN upcoming media API. I've looked at the various like intent donation mechanisms. I cannot figure out why Overcast now, post rewrite, gets way less invocation that way. Like when you plug in your AirPods and you click play, Overcast is very unlikely to be there after a few minutes. The memory usage of the app is way lower than it used to be, so I don't think it's being jettisoned from memory. I don't know what it is. Again, I've gone over all the intent code. I've gone over all of the media API code. I cannot figure this out. I cannot figure out what is different. And believe me, I'm getting reviewed for it. All of this is. I don't want to complain too much, but I will say this is an area where it's hard being an audio app developer because again, you get blamed for all these problems, and a lot of these problems are just really difficult to work around or solve, and you're kind of at the whims of the system. I have no idea what to do to improve that. I just guess. I try things and I guess, and sometimes it works, and then the next iOS point update, it changes and it breaks again. And I have no idea why my code didn't change in that area. It's tough. I wish I could solve that one problem. That is my number one white whale wish list item since the rewrite of I wish I could achieve this with Overcast. I wish I could get it back to when you plug in your headphones, it is the one recommended to you, and it is the one that if you click play, it plays. I have no idea how to do that. I've tried so many things. If anybody knows, please let me know.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is no fun.
Maybe I should use a DTS incident for the first time ever.
we should talk about this at length another time, but I very, very much think you should. I don't think anything will come of it, but if you, like me, just let those go to waste every year, you should absolutely do that. Sorry, for those that aren't familiar, what is it? Something technical support.
Developer technical support,
yeah. And basically, at least as we sit here now, you get 2 of these a year where you can basically sort of kind of cut to the front of the line and say, no, really, I really need a human being to look at this radar, this feedback. And I've done this once or twice. And one time, if I remember right, it worked really well. I'm pretty sure we talked about it on the show. And one time it was like, well, that was a complete waste. Generally speaking, anyone I've ever spoken to that has done this has positive things to say for the most part. So yeah, I think if nothing else, it would make for great hashtag content if you give it a shot. But no, you should ask about it. And I suspect they'll say, tough nugs, this is the way it is. You know, there's nothing you can do about it, but can't hurt.
Yeah, because I've heard good things about DTS. So the idea is like you can actually, it's basically you're filing a tech support ticket with Apple saying, I can't figure out why my code or your code is doing this. Can you please look at this? And a human will look at it. And yeah, as Keith said, you get 2 per year in the developer program. I think you can buy more, but it's right. Because it's so limited and 2 per year sounds so incredibly scarce to me. I've never thought that any problem was worth using it on. In part because, look, I'm not good at asking for help, I'll be honest. But also, the fact that it's so limited, it's like when you get like the really special sword in the video game. I never use it because I'm like, I'm going to lose it. If I use the really special sword and I go out there and do something stupid and die and lose it, I'm going to be so upset that I'd rather just keep it in my storage crate back at my base. And I'll bring it out sometime, but I never actually do because I'm always afraid of losing it.
Stealth Arc Raiders content from Marco.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So I was thinking more like Minecraft. But yeah, it's fine.
Arc Raiders is the same thing. I have so many good guns sitting in my vault that I don't want to take them out because I know I'll die with them.
Right. Like that. Like I never, when something is as limited as like you get 2 of these per year, I'm always like, well, this problem that I'm facing, what if I use my DTS tickets and then later I need some really important help on something really urgent? Like it's that kind of psychology of, you know, loss aversion and limited capacity of things. Like, you know what? I don't want to use a special sword. I'm just going to build my base right on top of the end portal and just build a bunch of stone swords and just fall into the end portal every single time and just keep dying until I beat the boss.
My tip for this is, I technically do use DTS for sure. Like, I think you should use it. This sounds like a perfect case. I mean, my thought with the DTS is always like, oh, they probably won't be able to help me, but who knows? Maybe they will. And anyway, you should use it. But if that doesn't work, if DTS is not able to figure it out, or whatever advice you get doesn't change things, there's another option that we have because we know some people in this community who have expertise in figuring out crap like this. If you're willing to share enough of your source code for them to like literally debug it, we know people who you can contract to say, hey, I'll pay you some money. Your debugging skills are better than mine. Figure this out. And they'll figure it out. We just talked about Guy Rambo, Daniel Jalkut's amazing debugger who does contract work. There are other names that I could chuck into our Slack channel. Certain people who like, this is one of their core skills. Like they know all the tricks with the debugger. They know how to do all this stuff that in theory you wouldn't be able to do. Like they, turn off system integrity protection and everything to just get in there and figure out what the hell is going on this phone that's not causing your app to be the next one that's played. If anyone can figure out, it's one of those people. And, they're out there and they'll take your money. So think about that as a backup strategy.
Honestly, I never considered that before. That's not a bad idea. Well, I'll think about that.
Yeah. See, the thing is, though, then you're showing people your source code. And if it's anything like me, that's like, coming out, going to school in your underwear or something like that.
But you're paying the money and you do it for people that you trust. Like Jalkut's not going to leak your source code, and he doesn't. No. He doesn't care about your source code. Let's find someone you trust to do it. And I think. Like that's the advantage of us being in this community. We know some people who are really good at this, and this is a very specialized skill that not every developer has, or every developer has to that degree. So, I mean, again, DTS first option for sure. But if that doesn't work out,
yeah, I will say it's terrifying having some like after I sold the magazine, at some point a few months later, Glenn Fleischman had contracted our friend Guy English to do some work on the code. And so Guy English got to see my code.
That would be terrifying.
Guy English is a really good programmer. And so I was mortified. I'm like, oh, no, you had him look at my code. And like the greatest compliment I ever got was later on, Guy told me like, yeah, it wasn't bad. It's like, oh my God.
I would absolutely take it wasn't bad from Guy English and put that shit on the wall.
I'm kind of insulted that you weren't terrified to show me your PHP code for the back end of ATP stuff. Apparently you didn't care about that.
No, not at all. Well, because the good news is PHP code, it's almost like writing really good Visual Basic code. It's like, there's really no great way to do this. Like, you can write less bad PHP code, but it's all going to be like a little bit clumsy. And so it's kind of like, you're just free. You know, it's like you're free to run around naked in your PHP code because what are you going to, like, everyone's PHP code is a little bit messed up.
Everything's crap everywhere, and when everything's crap, nothing's crap.
Exactly. It's very freeing.
I'm not sure if I agree with that philosophy, but anyway.
Gracious. We are going so far off the rails. All right, bringing it back. An anonymous industry insider had thoughts about the RAM shortage. The Verge article, called RAM is Ruining Everything, was not quite fair to the DRAM makers, implying that we are artificially keeping supply low. This is simply false. We are in a pure demand overrun right now. Our fabs are running at full max-out mode currently, optimizing bit output over all else, even shifting new product introduction in order to optimize output on the already high-yielding parts. And why wouldn't we? Every chip we make is making huge margins right now because demand is so high. At the end of the article, they did mention that Micron and Hynix are, in fact, building new fabs, but this understates what's actually happening. After spending almost 20 years without building any new DRAM fabs in the world, the next 10 years could nearly double the total DRAM wafer output, at which point the DRAM companies better hope to God the AI bubble doesn't burst. Some examples of this that were provided by the anonymous person. Micron has 6 DRAM fabs on the roadmap, all in the U.S., 3 of which should be online before 2030. This will increase Micron wafer output by nearly 200%. Hynix just doubled the size of their biggest fab, and if OpenAI's order of 900,000 wafers a month goes through, Hynix is going to build 4 more mega fabs, each of which is the size of 4 regular fabs. Additionally, Samsung is converting NAND fabs into DRAM, which will hurt NAND pricing but help DRAM.
I don't want to hurt NAND pricing. I need my 8 terabyte SD to be cheaper. I guess cheaper RAM in 2030 is something to look forward to after the AI bubble bursts. But
additionally, this doesn't help things in the next year, but these things take time to build. One more final technical note: a major reason consumer and mobile DRAM is getting squeezed so hard is because the AI companies are buying HBM, or high bandwidth memory, and a lot of it. HBM has a 3+1 trade ratio with normal DRAM. That means to make 100 gigs of HBM, it takes 3 to 4 times more wafers than it does to make 100 gigs of DDR whatever, LPDDR whatever, or GDDR whatever. The trade ratio is due to both technical reasons. For example, the HBM dies are much larger per gigabyte than standard dies because they have to allocate a ton of silicon floor space for the through-silicon via technology used in the chip stacking, as well as lower yields due to the very complex packaging. Every gigabyte of HBM that's being made means 3 or 4 fewer gigabytes of regular DRAM that can be made.
By the way, for whatever it's worth, I really enjoyed last week, the Vergecast did a RAM Holiday Spectacular episode, and it's a lot of fun, and also I learned a lot about the DRAM shortage right now and what all these factors, how they all play into it and everything. So I can strongly recommend the episode of the Vergecast from last week called RAM Holiday Spectacular.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about Git portability. Simon Jodet writes, Git is very portable, and that's why GitHub tries to keep you with other proprietary features such as GitHub Actions. They use their own syntax, and migrating can represent a significant investment. It's no surprise Microsoft tried their crummiest changes on this aspect of their product. Luckily, some open source projects like Gitea, Gitea, use a compatible syntax. For do-it-yourselfers, Gitea is really easy to set up with a Docker Compose file. Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, I don't use any of those fancy features in GitHub, but yeah, they do provide value add, as they would say in the business, by providing features above and beyond just what Git provides. But if you avoid them or are willing to, port from those things, GitHub issues are similar. Like, you use those, Casey. Like, that's not strictly part of Git. That's part of GitHub, but most systems have some kind of issue tracking thing. So yeah, migration gets more difficult the more you integrate with those platform-specific features. But those features are good. So, there's a reason they call it value add. It's not entirely cynical.
Tom Hartnett writes, John gave me the impression he might be going to github.com, creating the remote repo, and then setting the upstream locally and pushing to it. I wanted to mention that you can create a new remote on GitHub from within your Xcode project, assuming you have your credentials wired up. You can even add the repo's description and set its public or private visibility.
I was indeed doing it manually for two reasons. One, I had no idea this feature exists, so there's that. But two, some of the features like the Git integration that it provided in Xcode, I just avoid because it's either been crashy or unreliable for me based on my experience from like years ago. Maybe it's gotten better now, but for example, I never push from within Xcode because for a long time, every time I pushed, it would like crash and leave stuff in a weird inconsistent state, or it would say it pushed, but it wouldn't really. So I always push from the command line. I mostly do my Git stuff from the command line, but yeah, Xcode does have this feature, and this is definitely easier than copying and pasting the commands that GitHub puts up. So next time I have to do this, I'll try it. We're not going to put these screenshots in because they're from Tom's actual thing and have like his username and stuff in there or whatever. But if you go to the little repo thing in the Xcode sidebar, right click on remotes and say new, you can say new remote, and it will prompt you and you'll be able to type in you want it to go on GitHub and blah, blah, blah. And you want it to be public or private. You can do that all from the GUI in Xcode without having to go to the command line. So I will check that out next time.
In the future, switching between iPhone and Android will get easier with new Apple and Google collaboration. So reading from Mac Rumors, Apple and Google are teaming up to make it easier for users to switch between iPhone and Android smartphones, according to 9to5 Google. There's a new Android Canary build available today that simplifies data transfer between two smartphones, and Apple's going to implement the functionality in an upcoming iOS 26 beta. Apple already has a Move to iOS app for transferring data from an Android device to an iPhone, while Google has an Android Switch app that can migrate data from an iPhone to an Android smartphone. The new method will apparently replace the existing apps. Both Apple and Google are facing regulatory pressure around the world, with multiple countries scrutinizing practices that might keep customers locked into a platform. Making it simpler for users to transition from one platform to another would be beneficial to both companies.
Git portability and data portability. We talked about this before about things that can increase competition and regulatory things being passed that might force platform owners to make transitioning easier. Again, Apple and Google had been doing something in this area. I'm sure their efforts were not great. This seems to be an improvement on both of those. We'll see when it ships. And I kind of assuming they're doing it in response to regulatory pressure, or it just makes their life easier to for them to both work. Because here's the thing about this. It is actually to both their advantages to have because everybody wants switching to be easier. They just all want the switching to go in their direction. And it's very difficult to make it so that switching is only easy in your direction and hard in the other, because that's also extremely anti-competitive and would probably run afoul of all the people currently suing Apple and Google. So fingers crossed that this helps a little bit. But yeah, this is something we don't really talk about much in the show because we're not recruiting people switching to Apple platforms from other platforms, nor are we frequently switching from Apple platforms to Google platforms. But people do. It's a thing that happens. Everyone doesn't stay on the same platform forever. People switch in both directions, and anything that makes that easier is welcome.
Can confirm. All right, with regard to display flicker in Tahoe, Daniel writes, the annoying thing about display flicker is that it can mean about 1,000 different things to different people. Full screen or just some content? Did the screen get all the way to full black, or did the brightness level just not change smoothly? Or was it the amount of HDR headroom, etc.? The public comments are sort of all over the place on how to reproduce it. First-party displays only, or third-party as well? Only HDR content or SDR as well? Do people realize some UI is now HDR? Do people realize the Studio Display does some fake HDR tricks? If nobody who can fix the issue is able to reproduce it, and there's no existing radar that seems to correlate, then there's not a lot that can be done, unless somebody can get an iPhone or whatever video of the issue and post it online. That would be super helpful, theoretically.
Taking video of screen flicker is going to run afoul of a whole host of problems. I mean, just taking video in the presence of certain LED lights can cause weird strobing stuff, and you're going to try to catch flicker on another display by taking video of it. But that's tricky. But here's the thing about these kind of bugs. Like, I get that, there's a lot of ones that we just avoid filing a feedback on, because it's like, it happens intermittently. I don't know how to reproduce it. It's hard to see, blah, blah, blah. But when something like this is just, it's so widespread that, like, I've seen enough of these stories all over the internet that it's not an epidemic. It's not crippling everybody's computers, but it's also not extremely rare. Like, I would say it is more common than the podcast app opening stuff up. This is a thing, and people have said that there's been screen flicker issues with the Studio Display and other displays even before Tahoe, but everyone agrees that it's gotten much worse with Tahoe. I kind of feel like this is on Apple. Like, everyone at that company is using Macs to do their dev work, right? They're running Tahoe, presumably. They've got to be seeing. They probably have Studio Displays. If anyone's going to have Studio Displays, it's going to be people at Apple, right? They're probably seeing this, right? So it's is the whole company going, well, I just assume someone else is taking care of this? Like, eventually they should be just as annoyed as we are. Oh, hey, we all upgraded to Tahoe, and now this stupid flickering is happening in all our Studio Displays. it's not my department because I work on the whatever app, but somebody should be fixing this, right? Please, Apple, like it's an institutional competency to be able to have your internal user base, like all the people who are Apple employees who use Macs all day, if they're all seeing, or some significant portion of them are seeing a bug like this flickering Tahoe thing, find it and fix it. It's not going to be some person who's working on the Notes app. It's not their responsibility to fix this, but they should be able to raise their hand internally and say, this is the thing. Somebody fix this. Because we on the outside can't, like, if we file a feedback, it's just to go into a black hole, like, show me the reproduction, again, show me the video, or how do you even capture this? But it's a thing that you can see with your eyes. So I really hope that there are folks working on this already, and I hope they do address it. I'm thankful that I haven't seen it on my studio display, but the Mac it is attached to is not running Tahoe.
I mean, I'm on Tahoe on this MacBook Pro, and I don't recall having ever seen this, or if I have, I explained it away internally as something else, because I've never noticed this, that I can tell. Sean Santry writes along the same topic, the studio display flickering introduced in Tahoe happens with my M2 Ultra Max Studio, so it's not just laptops. For me, it seems to happen pretty reliably when visiting YouTube and Safari, and there's an auto preview of an HDR video, even though the studio display doesn't support HDR. Philip Hofstadter writes, the flickering of the studio display happens whenever any HDR content appears on screen. It happened in previous macOS versions too, but HDR was much more sparingly used in the system UI. So in our own follow-up, we've gotten that it's only for HDR, and it's only in Tahoe, except it's not only in Tahoe, and it's sometimes HDR. Like, it's all over the place.
So I know HDR is used more in the iOS interface. Like, it started with the new Siri surround thing, and then Tahoe does it even more, and then any of the ML stuff, right? But not Tahoe, iOS 26 does it even more with all the machine learning and the AI stuff, that everything being bright, like cleanup in photos does HDR, right? But does Tahoe's interface use HDR a lot? Like, I'm sure it uses it somewhere. Again, cleanup on Tahoe, it will use HDR because it does everywhere, right? In the Photos app or whatever. But just for like menus, windows, sidebars, toolbars, buttons, I don't think any of that is HDR in Tahoe. So I'm not sure about the idea that, it's worse in Tahoe because the UI uses more HDR. I mean, I'm willing to believe it uses slightly more, but most of the UI you're seeing is not HDR, even in Tahoe. So I'm not sure about this, but I am willing to believe that the flicker could be triggered by having HDR content somewhere. And the thing that Daniel was referencing of, like, the studio display is not HDR, like, it doesn't get that bright, but it does, I think it does, like, reserve some portion of it to, if you have the screen brightness down, to go higher than your brightness setting to do sort of fake HDR. I'm not sure how that works, but I think that's what he was alluding to. So anyway, this is Apple's bug. Marco's got his weird bug to fix that he doesn't quite know how to fix. This is Apple's weird bug that hopefully someone there knows how to fix.
Maybe they should file a DTS incident and see what happens.
Or just drive their computer over to Craig's house. All right, let's do topics, and we might only get to one today, and that is the disappointing truth about Wi-Fi 7. So, John, you've brought this to the table, and there's a post by Michael John Wood at Ratings, Artings, or whatever it's called. And Michael writes, Wi-Fi 7, IEEE 802.11be, extremely high throughput, is billed as the next major leap in wireless performance. At the center of these claims sits one headline feature, multi-link operation, or MLO, a core capability of Wi-Fi 7 and a required feature for Wi-Fi certified 7 devices. Intended to allow simultaneous use of the 2.45 and 6 gigahertz bands for faster, smoother, and more resilient connections. The problem is that the 802.11be specification defines MLO broadly, permitting implementations that technically satisfy the requirement while delivering only limited real-world benefit. Existing Wi-Fi implementations treat 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz as separate mutually exclusive pipes. MLO is supposed to let a client device use multiple bands simultaneously. The 802.11be specification actually defines two very different modes of multi-link operation. Simultaneous MLO, which enables multiple bands to operate as a single unified connection. This requires precise coordination across radios, keeping them time-aligned so that they can transmit and receive concurrently with microsecond level switching across all links. There's also alternating MLO, which is designed for hardware that cannot keep multiple radios synchronized. Instead of true concurrency, a single radio rapidly time slices across different bands with predictable padding and transition delays. None of the routers we tested support simultaneous MLO. This gap likely reflects the limitations of current hardware, which is not yet capable of achieving the sub-microsecond timing alignment required between different independent radios. Instead of implementing true simultaneous MLO, most routers fall back on the simpler single radio alternating mode. As shown in the results table on their website, 21 of the routers we tested advertise some level of alternating MLO support. However, nearly all of them report non-physical timing values, specifically 0 millisecond transition and padding delays. Such values are not feasible in real operation and strongly suggest placeholder or incomplete implementations. Only one product, the AirPods 7, advertises realistic, physically plausible timing parameters that indicate a correctly implemented alternating mode protocol. Because alternating MLO still serializes traffic through a single radio, it provides little of the latency benefit that MLO is marketed to deliver. And without proper timing and padding, even the theoretical advantages of alternating MLO cannot materialize in practice. Our results highlight how wireless networking terminology and even formal certification can obscure meaningful technical differences. In current product marketing, three similar sounding terms are often conflated, despite having very different implications. Wi-Fi 7, that's Pascal case, right? Wi-Fi space 7. Vendor-defined marketing label with no formal standing in the Wi-Fi Alliance's certification programs. WI-FI 7 is an informal reference to the IEEE 802.11be generation of Wi-Fi technology, while Y-Fi itself is a trademark of the Y-Fi Alliance. Use of this term alone does not imply certification. So let me repeat that. The difference between the first thing I read and the second thing is a hyphen. Then finally, Y-Fi Certified 7 is a designation used exclusively on products that have passed the Wi-Fi Alliance's official certification process and appear in its certified product database. Of the 25 routers evaluated in the study, only 3 are currently Wi-Fi Certified 7. Certification establishes a baseline for standards compliance and interoperability, but our results show that it is neither a guarantee of a complete MLO implementation nor a reliable predictor of real-world behavior. Notably, the only router in our testing that advertises a technically coherent implementation of alternating MLO, the AirPods 7, is not Wi-Fi Certified 7. Cool.
Oh my God.
So I like this is Artings at its best. Like, it's just, they're digging deeper into a topic, instead of just saying we tested a bunch of routers and here are the good ones. They're like, Wi-Fi 7, it's a new thing. It promises a bunch of stuff. Let's test these to see if any of them are using the big fancy new features, and in particular to be able to use 3 radios at once, which has lots of advantages that I mostly snipped out of the summary. But it's like, if obviously using 3 radios at once, you have the advantage of, potentially more bandwidth. If you have any kind of interference on one of the channels, the other channels might still be good. It's and obviously you can see why it would be better, and you'd get more bandwidth and lower latency or whatever, and be more resilient to interference because you're using, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 6 gigahertz all at the same time. But apparently nobody does that. I mean, they tested 25 routers. That's not all the routers in the world. But one of these routers was like $1,000 router, like Asus, like $1,000 wireless access point. So they didn't shy away from testing the high end stuff. Ubiquiti was in there as well. And literally nobody is doing simultaneous multi-link operations, simultaneous MLO. And only some of them are apparently doing alternating. Alternating is you use one connection and you switch from 2.4 to 5 to 6 or whatever as you need very quickly, right? Which is still good and interesting and a kind of MLO, but it's not the simultaneous kind of MLO. So even the fancy Ubiquiti routers weren't doing that, although they were not the most expensive in the test. And the certification thing is just ridiculous. So we'll link to the article. Obviously, the table they're referring to is like a table that shows a bunch of features along the top, and then along the left side are all the different routers. And you either get like a green check mark, a red X, or like a yellow half-filled circle to see whether you implement it. And simultaneous MLO, red X's for everybody. And then alternating MLO, red X's for almost everybody, including all the era routers except for one. So it's not looking great for this standard. And I saw this article. I'm like, okay, well, but why? I like that they dug into this, and I can read the article to see how they did it. They had like a Linux computer set up, analyzing the traffic to they weren't just testing like, well, if it goes faster, it must be using simultaneous MLO. They were trying to detect the actual protocol differences in the use of the different spectrum or whatever. And I'm assuming they did a pretty good job, but it's like, all right, well, you did this article, but like, is this actionable? It may be interesting from a technical perspective, but if like, again, they only tested 25 routers, but if you can't buy a quote unquote good one, like then this article is basically like they're all not good. Like there's no like avoid these ones, but get these ones because these ones say Wi-Fi 7, but it doesn't do the cool things that these do, even though they also say Wi-Fi 7. But this is like, nope, nobody does it. So I was like, this is very unsatisfying. Like what is the deal here? I did some brief searches of my own to try to figure out what I could find here, and where I ended up, where you always end up when you Google for things, Reddit. And it was a Reddit discussion of this very post, and the top-rated comment on the Reddit thing. Again, it's a person on Reddit. Take it for what you want, but I think what they had to say rings true for me. I'm going to find out in the next episode. They're going to say, "Oh, this person works on the IEEE 802.11be standard," or whatever. It's like the last time it was the person who worked on the USB standard. But yeah, I thought this was interesting.
So Protons and Neutrons on Reddit writes, the Wi-Fi Alliance and IEEE are two independent bodies. Wi-Fi 7 certified is not the same as the complete IEEE 802.11be specification. In fact, the Wi-Fi Alliance picks and chooses what it wants from the IEEE drafts. Yes, drafts, before they are released. Wi-Fi Alliance traditionally rejects some of the features from IEEE, especially in the first release. Wait, first release? Yes. For the past 3 generations, the Wi-Fi Alliance has split every Wi-Fi release into a Release 1 and Release 2. We had Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2. We had Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6 Release 2. We have Wi-Fi 7, and Wi-Fi 7 Release 2 is due in less than a quarter, in late 2025, which is over now, or early 2026. These are hardware releases. It is unlikely your Wi-Fi 6 Release 1 access point or client will ever get uplink MU-MIMO, even though that was heavily marketed for Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi Alliance decided that features needed more time for implementation and pushed it to Wi-Fi 6 Release 2. Wi-Fi Certified 7 was announced by the Wi-Fi Alliance in January 2024, but IEEE was still tweaking until August 2024. So the Wi-Fi Alliance jumped the gun by around 8 months. Why? IEEE is, as you expect, just an engineering body, but Wi-Fi Alliance is a marketing and standards body. Some optional features basically never get implemented by some routers and clients because they're too complex, too expensive, not reliable enough, too power hungry, etc. It's usually the same reason why we don't have 4x4 laptops or 3x3 smartphones. It costs more, it consumes more power, and the performance difference is marginal. For example, I would not be surprised if simultaneous MLO is never widely implemented in consumer mobile devices, with some high-end exceptions, of course. Why? It consumes more power to transmit on 2 or 3 bands at once. We do not get 1.5 gigabits per second transfer rates for free, unfortunately. The general advice I give to people, if you buy a Release 1 device, don't expect most of the marketing for that generation to be true. The Wi-Fi Alliance has ensured you will not get all of the marketing features that news articles actually take from IEEE months or years earlier for that generation. But you should get most, if not all, Release 2 features of the previous generation. So a Wi-Fi 7 Release 1 access point or client should confidently get you Wi-Fi 6 Release 2 features. And then Mr. Hio Super replied, this is somehow even more messy than Bluetooth and USB.
I mean, at least it maybe works better than Bluetooth. I do think that USB still probably takes the cake for hardware confusion, but this is quite a mess. I mean, I think we've all been aware of Wi-Fi, and I guess even before Wi-Fi, modems, like analog modems back in the day, hardware being released before the standard that they're based on has been ratified or finalized. Do you remember that with like 56K modems and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Like, because people want to get the hardware out there. And like people that, you know, these standards bodies are working on standards for some faster way to transmit data over some medium, right? And they're almost done, but they haven't really like ratified it and nailed down all the details. But hardware makers like, no, we're making hardware based on your draft specification and we're going to sell it. And people will buy it because it is faster than what was out there. But then they say, okay, well, when they ratify the standard, like you'll be able to firmware update your modem or whatever, your access point, and it'll become compliant with the standard. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But here, in the case of like these standards that have lots of different features, some of which apparently are way more expensive or complicated to implement. I mean, it happened with Wi-Fi 6, and it's happening again with Wi-Fi 7. If like the standard is out and, you know, the difference between IEEE, which makes the standard, and then the Wi-Fi Alliance, which like certifies, them being two separate bodies that seem to only coordinate a little bit, means that like the Wi-Fi Alliance is saying, okay, well, there's the standard, but nobody makes anything that complies with the whole standard. So we're going to make a certification thing that says, here's the Wave 1 certification. If you do these things from the standard, we'll give you our stamp that says you are Wi-Fi certified 7 release 1, whatever like tag they want to put on it. And then later if people figure out how to implement more features, we'll say, okay, that you can be released too. And as this person points out, apparently they may not ever have a Wi-Fi line certification that covers all the features in 802.11 BE, right? And I'm so glad we moved away from those. But I remember I used to know all those initials and everything, and then they changed I guess they changed with Wi-Fi 5 or 6. They started using the big number instead of the 802.11, a bunch of letters. That's an improvement at least. But yeah, it's confusing because do you have Wi-Fi 7? Yeah, I have Wi-Fi 7. Oh, well, is it Wi-Fi certified? If it is, which release is it certified to? And if it's not, what the heck features does it support? And one of the reasons I thought this was interesting is because I was reflecting on my Wi-Fi 7 situation, which is I ain't got it. I have Wi-Fi 7. Like I think my iPhone 16 Pro has it. My wife has an iPhone 17 Pro that I believe has it. As I've complained about on past episodes, I think Apple's Macs still do not support Wi-Fi 7, which is crappy. But the bottom line is, in my house, my Wi-Fi setup was purchased before Wi-Fi 7 existed. So it's Wi-Fi 6. I forget which variant of Wi-Fi 6, but it's not Wi-Fi 7 at all. And I've been thinking about Kieran Healy just posted about this on Mastodon. Like, everything in my house, networking-wise, works fine. No one complains that they're not getting enough bandwidth. No one complains they're not getting enough signal. Everything I do on my network works. Video never stutters. My downloads go fast. Like, I don't have any complaints. And yet, the number 7 is, in fact, one bigger than the number 6. And so I find myself thinking, when is the right time for me to, for example, replace my Eero with an Eero that supports Wi-Fi 7. And after reading this article, I think the conclusion I've come to is not quite yet. But I thought I didn't know any of this simultaneous MLO versus alternating MLO stuff. And reading that one random person on Reddit makes me think I kind of believe that no one will implement that, because if no one's implemented it so far and it does take more power and everything, like, who's going to do it? But we'll see. But anyway, what are your situations like in your house in terms of Wi-Fi 7? Do you have it? Do you want it? Are you going to get it?
I mean, for me, I am starting my unified journey mostly by bequeathed or secondhand hardware. And no, none of my stuff is Wi-Fi 7 compatible, and I don't expect to go down that road anytime soon. I mean, anything that I feel like needs a whole bunch of bandwidth, I have wired. And, I even have 10 gigabit Ethernet between my Synology and my MacBook Pro, which is really freaking great. And so for me, I don't think I'm going to be jumping on this bandwagon anytime soon. If it becomes real, like everyone keeps saying, or I feel like the nerds keep saying, oh no, Wi-Fi 7 will make Ethernet obsolete, and leaving aside latency, which I know this is supposed to help with, but even leaving aside latency, I'll believe it when I see it. And nothing that I've read today has made me think it's closer. In fact, this makes me think it's a long way out.
I thought you had 2.5 gigabits between your Mac and your Synology because of the Thunderbolt thing.
No, the CalDigit TS5 has onboard 10 gigabit Ethernet. And that, I think there's some things I lose out on by not having Thunderbolt 5, but I have definitely pushed like hundreds of megabytes per second between my Synology and my MacBook Pro. Unfortunately, because it's all, spinning Rust in the Synology, it usually will peak for, 500, 600, 700 megs for a few seconds. Then it'll drop down to like 200 or 300 megs a second, but it's still pretty freaking great nonetheless.
And to be clear, what you're referring to is the Ubiquiti brand of
yes.
networking hardware. Again, it was some Ubiquiti stuff was in this test. I don't know. I'm sure they didn't test every possible thing Ubiquiti offers.
No,
Again, it was only 25 routers. But yeah, buying a fancy, expensive brand is not a guarantee they'll lose. In my Googling, I also found a bunch of Cisco presentations, and they were talking about their Wi-Fi 7 hardware rollout and whatever year they started it, and they had specific slides that said basically, yeah, we're not doing simultaneous MLO because it's too hard and too expensive. Maybe we'll have it in the future, right? So the sort of high-end, fancy, enterprisey, or like prosumery things like Ubiquiti are not usually the first ones to jump on the bandwagon of a new thing, and are take a more cautious approach because it's more important, especially for like enterprise stuff. It's more important for the stuff to work reliably than for it to get just a little tiny bit faster or whatever, because being flaky is worse than going a little bit slower. But yeah, I do think like especially for home Wi-Fi, like I'm trying to think of a scenario where it depends on what the power, like this thing is saying, oh, it takes more power. It takes more power to run radios at the same time. Is there a scenario where I would make that trade-off, where I would say, okay, well, obviously it doesn't matter for the access point. The access point is plugged into the wall. It can use as much power as it wants as long as it doesn't have obnoxious fans. But are there any devices that use Wi-Fi that I would be willing to make that trade-off to get the increased bandwidth? And I'm not entirely sure. Again, everything in my house is not Wi-Fi 7 now, and I don't have any bandwidth complaints, which every time I think about upgrading stuff, I think, what are you doing? Everything works. Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Like, just leave it alone. But speaking of that, Marco, how's Wi-Fi 7 going in your house?
My policy for my Wi-Fi gear is when I am setting up a home network, I buy whatever is pretty good at that time from Ubiquiti, then I just leave it, because I don't know if I'm unusual here. I don't think I am in this case. Wi-Fi speeds are not my limiting factor to almost anything. Now, I think it's very important for people to realize also that whenever there's some new Wi-Fi standard, they always brag about a certain speed capability that in practice, no one ever gets. Like in practice, you would have to be like standing next to the router in an environment with perfect conditions and no interference to get most of the speeds that are advertised by the Wi-Fi specs. These are like speeds in ideal cases, not speeds that you will get when the router is, in your living room and you're upstairs, or, not speeds that you're going to get if there's like a wall anywhere in your house, or if there's anyone else using the Wi-Fi at the same time. And so what I usually, experience with Wi-Fi is, am I using my phone or laptop and does it seem to work? Yes or no? Like, it's more of a Boolean. It's like, does it work or not? Does the Wi-Fi connect? And if the Wi-Fi is connecting, odds are it is going to offer enough throughput that I'm not going to notice the Wi-Fi being a problem. Now, my internet in each place is gigabit Ethernet, which is, wonderful. I love gigabit Fios. Thank you so much, Fios, for existing. All the wiring and all the hubs and switches I use everywhere, those are all gigabit too. I've been at gigabit speeds for my internal and external networking for many years now, and I've never really felt that was a problem either. Everything is fast enough for my purposes of, like, do I notice the networking? I'm not doing frequent, large, multi-gigabyte file transfers between my computers and my Synologies or whatever, different storages, but if I were doing those things, it would be over wires. I wouldn't really be subject to the whims of Wi-Fi. But the Wi-Fi in my house, so at the beach, I have, I think, a mix of Wi-Fi 5 and 6. That's the oldest equipment I currently run. At the restaurant, it's all 6, because when I was setting up the restaurant, everyone was saying, like, it's a little bit shaky, maybe. And then here on Long Island, it's a mix of Wi-Fi 7 and Wi-Fi 6 gear, because it's just whatever I bought. It's like I bought a few, and I'm like, oh, I need one or two more, like that kind of thing. But it doesn't really matter. Like, nothing I do with Wi-Fi, nothing ever matters. I never look like, am I connected to Wi-Fi 7 or Wi-Fi 6? Am I on the right frequencies? Am I using all the channels I can use? Like, I never look. I let Ubiquiti auto manage the channel spreads and everything for me. And all I care about really is, do I have signal in this room or not? And that's much more to do with the placement of the Wi-Fi APs and how many of them there are and what they're going through to get to you. And every new Wi-Fi standard that comes out doesn't do anything to meaningfully make that more robust. It's more like, if you have great conditions, this is what we'll be able to do for you. But what most of us are battling with our Wi-Fi issues is like, yeah, this bedroom over here is getting 15 megabits because it's like a little bit weak on the signal and it's a little bit far from the thing because it's going through 2 walls instead of 1 wall or whatever it is. Like, that's real Wi-Fi problems that real people have. No one is actually going to notice if their Wi-Fi goes from 600 megabits to 800 megabits or a gigabit. Like, that's so far beyond what anyone's actually getting in real life and what they would actually notice in almost any usage.
Well, the new standards do have things for battling interference. It's one of the advertised features of simultaneous MLO.
Yeah, they all say that, But that one bedroom, you still can't get that good of a signal unless you put an access point nearby.
Right, but I'm saying like I do think that if you upgrade your Wi-Fi, in particular, if you upgrade your access point hardware, even if you leave it all in the same place, and the new hardware is both newer and also uses a new standard, you do have a chance of potentially getting slightly better signal. It's not going to make the room that's really far from an access point suddenly be perfect, but it could improve matters. I saw that when I upgraded whatever my current one is, like Wi-Fi 6E or whatever old ERO I had before. The access points are in exactly the same place. I just removed the old access points and put in the new ones from the same company, and I did get better signal everywhere. It's not as measured by like bandwidth. Like I'm not doing like speed tests or trying to download huge files, but the signal strength is better. And thinking of applications where it would make a difference for me, I'm also not transferring huge files, and the video stuff that I have. I mean, I get one thing I don't do because I don't have disk space. Someday when my Synology finally dies, knock on wood, and I upgrade to like modern storage and I have much more space, maybe I will revisit the idea of putting Blu-ray rips on it. I experimented that when I first got my Synology, but Blu-ray rips are huge. And I believe I would run into Wi-Fi bandwidth problems trying to play essentially like, the original quality in Plex or whatever, like, playing a Blu-ray rip directly from my Synology in a distant bedroom that has bad signal.
Like onto an iPad? Like what's the device here?
Yeah, an iPad or anything like that.
Like you wouldn't be wired, you're saying?
Yeah, wireless iPad television watching in bed, and I do it all the time, and it's fine. But I'm not watching 50 gig Blu-ray rips. I'm watching much more compressed content, and it's fine for the lower bitrate compressed content. But I did experiment with doing Blu-ray rips, and everyone's like, "Oh, you got to do that." I have all these Blu-rays. I would love to rip them at original quality, like no recompression at all. But that might stress my current Wi-Fi. Now, would a new Wi-Fi thing help with that? Or to Marco's point, what would really help with that is better access point locations. But part of the problem is part of the dream of a new Wi-Fi hardware for me is like, it's not that easy for me to add new Wi-Fi access point locations. Like my house is not plumbed for any kind of wiring, and the places where I can put access points are pretty limited. And then the places where I would want to put an access point, like in terms of them not being an eyesore, is also very limited. And, my house is filled with 100-year-old plaster and lead in the walls or whatever the hell stuff I've got going on. It's like, it's a challenging situation. Another scenario that I thought of, again, reading this Artings or ratings.com article about the promises and dreams of the Wi-Fi 7 thing. One of them is about with the simultaneous multi-link operation, which nobody has, was about latency. And I was just mentioning this to my wife the other day. We were in Costco and I was looked at this. I look at it occasionally when I go by. There is a extremely stupid Sony device that they sell that looks like a Nintendo Switch, but by Sony that plays PlayStation games. But it's not. What it is a PlayStation 5 controller cracked in half with the screen stuck in the middle. But it doesn't have any, you can't play games on it. All it is a remote viewer for your actual PlayStation 5 console in your house. So that's basically I'll put a link to it in the chat room. It's called the PlayStation Portal Remote Player, and you need a PlayStation, and this wirelessly connects to your PlayStation and lets you play it like a Nintendo Switch. Now, I like it because I think the PlayStation 5 controller handles are much more comfortable than the Switch. I don't do any handheld games because of RSI issues, but I do use my PlayStation 5 controller all the time, and I find it ergonomically way better than holding a Switch. And also I find it better than the Switch Pro controller, both the original and 2. But anyway, and it's got a not very good screen in there. I do occasionally on my iPad launch the PlayStation Remote Play app, because there's an app for iPadOS that lets you wake up your PlayStation and then just use it from your iPad with on-screen controls. I do it when I forgot to do something in one of my games or something. And so from bed with my iPad with terrible on-screen controls, I will fumble my way through doing some kind of chore in Destiny or Arc Raiders or something and then turn the thing off. But I could fully play my PlayStation in bed with this thing, except do I want to be playing a real-time, reaction time is a factor kind of action game like Destiny or Arc Raiders over my current Wi-Fi setup from my bedroom, which doesn't have the best signal? Maybe Wi-Fi 7 would help. I've resisted buying this thing because it's $200 for a controller and a screen, although I think you can buy an individual controller with no screen for $200 from Sony as well. And also because I think my wife would not tolerate me using this thing in bed next to her because whether you know it or not, using controls makes noise. Like the buttons and the joysticks actually make noise. You don't notice when you're playing, but certainly if someone was trying to sleep next to you, it makes noise. What doesn't make noise is me watching video with my AirPods in on my iPad because I'm not doing anything with my hands. But I think she would be annoyed by this. But this is the one application I can think of. Maybe Casey's case would be like, I don't know, like transferring to Synology without wires from somewhere if you ever need to do that. But mine would be, could I play the hypothetical PlayStation Portal remote player, let's say from my couch or something, because my PlayStation is not on the connected to television, it's connected to a gaming monitor. Could I do handheld gaming within my house with my current Wi-Fi setup? And would that be improved by a theoretical simultaneous MLO Wi-Fi 7 setup? I guess stay tuned, because I mean, Artings usually does a good job of following up on this. If hardware ever is released that supports the simultaneous MLO, I'm sure they'll do a follow-up story on it, and we'll try to cover it here as well. It does seem like Wi-Fi 7, it's not brand new. Like there's plenty of hardware out there. Apple is shipping it in a lot of their devices. That's the other part of this that I didn't mention. Like, it doesn't matter if you buy an access point. Like say they found an access point. This one supports simultaneous MLO. Great. Do you have any client devices that support simultaneous MLO? Because I'm assuming nothing Apple sells does.
No,
like their Macs don't even support Wi-Fi 7. The phones almost certainly don't for power reasons. Like, you know, the iPad doesn't. Does the PlayStation Portal remote player support it? Probably not. Like, you need it takes two to tango here. So it just seems like this is a standard that's like ahead of its time. And like the advice at the end of the Reddit posters thing is saying basically like, maybe when you get your Wi-Fi 8 release 1 thing, it will support all the features from Wi-Fi 7 release 1 and 2. Kind of depressing, but it does have some historical precedent. So I guess the moral of the story is that networking is always complicated, and if it works, don't touch it. Although I'm kind of shocked that Marco does that, honestly.
No, because again, it's like my Wi-Fi is fine. So for whatever it's worth, I looked up what is the bit rate of like the highest UHD 4K Blu-rays, and the answer seems to be somewhere around 130, peaking at 150 megabits per second. But it's around 130 megabits per second, sustained. And I opened up the Ubiquiti Wi-Fi Man app on my phone to just see like how fast is my phone currently connecting to the access point that is maybe 10 feet away in my office closet. And it's telling me that it's connected via Wi-Fi 6 mode, even though it is a U7 access point, but whatever. Because I don't think the phones are Wi-Fi 7, right? So
no, the phones are Wi-Fi 7 now.
Oh, well, it's not using it for some reason. I don't care why. So anyway, my phone's connected via Wi-Fi 6, currently sustaining a transfer rate of approximately 460 megabits per second. So that's, almost 4 times the data rate of a 4K UHD Blu-ray. So to give you some idea, like if that is like your stress test for like how can Wi-Fi handle this, like my pretty good modern Wi-Fi setup handles it just fine when the access point is close.
Yeah, that's that. But my bedroom is not is one of the worst case scenarios for access point locality. Like obviously, if I did it from the room with the access point, I would have no problem. But if I get distant in my very wireless unfriendly house, that's where it gets harder. And that's like I did see an improvement in terms of data rates when I upgraded from whatever I had before. I think I had a Wi-Fi 5 thing before I upgraded to 6E. I did see an improvement in the bedroom in terms of, no, it sounds bad. I saw an improvement in the bedroom when I upgraded to Wi-Fi 6E.
Were you using True Grip Mac, the smart skin technology?
That's right, yeah.
Jeez,
using the comply tips. And so I have hope that like a place, because, I can play Blu-ray rips, but they would occasionally stutter, right? And I'd be like, oh, just, whatever, the rats are moving the lead inside the walls. Like, it's such a bet. I would hope that it would get better. And the same thing with the PlayStation Portal. Like, that's not a bandwidth thing. It's because the bandwidth, I'm sure, massively compresses the signal. It's all about latency. You want it to be the lowest possible latency. And again, that's one of the advertised features of the fancy Wi-Fi 7 is they can reduce latency by essentially routing around any weaknesses in the signal by using 3 radios at the same time instead of switching between them. So,
by the way, 6 milliseconds, the answer, the current latency of that same connection I was just talking about. So it's really not like this is Wi-Fi 6. it's just with good reception. Like being close to the access point matters so much more than what protocol the access point is speaking.
Yeah, I just need to run an Ethernet wire up to my bedroom, but just there's a lot of walls between me and that. I just
run it out the window and pop it back in.
But so the people who had this house before us, they like their coax for like their cable television. They had cable television in many rooms because, I don't know, they did it in the 90s or the 80s or whatever. It was the style at the time. And how did they get it into all the rooms? They ran it. They drilled a hole through the house to the outdoors. They ran the coax outside the house, up the outside of the house, and then drilled another hole into the room they wanted to go to. And they did that in every room in the house.
Oh, my God.
So why don't you get mini splits? What are you waiting for?
Now, well, when I got the house resided, all that crap went away. And there are no longer 500 holes drilled through my house with coax stuck to the outside of it.
You didn't just fish some Cat 6 through there instead?
Or use Mocha bridges.
It's all gone. No, it's all gone now. Well, unfortunately, when I got new siding in the house, I also filled the walls with insulation, which was a massive improvement in the comfort of the house, but also made it one more extra difficulty to try to route wire. I'm sure an electrician could do it, but with plaster walls, it's always just such a mess. Anyway, I don't know. I'll see if I can figure it out. I do have if people are going to say you should have a mesh network, I do. Eero is a mesh network, but mesh networks are no match for running Ethernet wires to your wireless access points. That is just so much better than mesh networking if you can do it.
Yeah, in both latency and throughput, it's no contest.
We are sponsored this week by Quince. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, it is the new year. Well, it's a new year everywhere, but here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's also winter where it's really cold, even way down here in the deep, deep, deep South, if you believe John Siracusa. Well, here's the thing. You probably want your winter wardrobe to be just locked in. And if you're ready for a winter reset, or if you just want to add a couple things, you can start with pieces truly made to last season after season. Quince brings together premium materials, thoughtful design, and enduring quality so you can stay warm, look sharp, and feel your best all season long. Quince has everything you need: men's Mongolian cashmere sweaters, wool coats, leather and suede outerwear that actually hold up to daily wear and still look good. And each piece is made from premium materials by trusted factories that meet rigorous standards for craftsmanship and ethical production, which I love. Also, I'm talking a bunch about men's stuff because that's the stuff I'm most familiar with, but Quince also does children's and women's things as well. So they sent me a couple of pieces at my request, and one of the things they sent is an organic cotton long sleeve fit and flare pocket dress for Michaela. And this thing is adorable. Not only does it have pockets, but it has these like orange and pink and blue hearts all over it. It's super duper cute. For me, I chose a Comfort Stretch Traveler 5-pocket pants, which is... It presents as like a semi-formal pant, something you could wear for business casual situations or meeting or whatever, but it feels more like jeans, and I mean that in a complimentary way because jeans are typically, well, for guys anyway, really, really comfortable. And I want to focus on something silly here. The button at the top of the fly, it's flat. It's a very tasteful silvery color, and it's flat. It doesn't say Quince all over it. It's not advertising or anything like that. It's just a button, a well-made button, which I love. So if this sounds good to you, and it should, you can refresh your winter wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ATP for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now it's available in Canada as well. So go to QUINCE.com/ATP. You can get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ATP. Thank you to Quince for sponsoring the show. All right, let's do some Ask ATP. And Michael Cruson writes, what is the distinction between minimizing versus hiding windows in macOS? As someone who uses Command-Tab to jump between my applications, I pretty much just hide my windows using Command-H, but find it confusing that the two are very similar UI concepts with different consequences. Why doesn't Apple merge this concept into one? Not a fan of Windows, but they at least have a single concept of minimizing application windows. In your opinion, should macOS be updated to have the same behavior? No. John, thoughts?
I mean, I don't know how windowing works exactly on Windows. I am familiar with minimizing with the little like underscore minus whatever button thing. But here's the thing. macOS 10 introduced this distinction between hiding windows, which existed for, I guess, the entire history of the Mac. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know when it was added. But ever since multitasking has been around, it existed in classic macOS. Let's say that. Hiding windows has existed in classic macOS and continued on in macOS 10. macOS 10 added minimizing windows. And minimizing means hitting the little yellow widget, and that means the window leaves where it was and goes down into your dock. Now, how it manifests in your dock is modifiable. Like I think there's a setting where you can have your minified windows sort of tuck into the application that they came from. You can also have them as separate items on your dock. This is all new to macOS 10 because the dock didn't exist before macOS 10 in macOS. Classic macOS did not have a dock. macOS 10 did have a dock. It's still there. Minimizing windows are still there. It's totally different than hiding. Hiding means leave the window where it is, just make it invisible. And you can hide and show with all the various windowing commands, and there are other ways you can do it. But anyway, the window hasn't moved. It's just either it's visible or it's not. Minimizing says take it from where it was and put it into the dock somewhere, somehow. If you have minimized windows, I believe this is the default, visible in the dock as separate items, you will see a tiny little version of your window with a little badge for the app icon in the current version of macOS. Like you can recognize your window from its tiny, tiny thumbnail in the dock. And so then you can visually scan and say, where was that window? It's not, you don't have to wonder where it is and go to the app where it is and do show all or anything like that. You can see it in your dock, click on it, and then the little genie effect will go woo, or the scale effect or whatever you picked will make it leave the dock and go back to where it was. I don't know how you could confuse these two things because they're just so incredibly different, but that's why they're both there. One of them lets you optionally continue to see tiny thumbnails of your windows while taking them off your screen, and the other one does not and just hides them in place where they are. And I wouldn't like them to replace either one of them because people like both of them, and you can mix and match them. If you like, I have a window minimized right now, but just one, but I have 1,000 hidden windows, right? Why did I minimize that one window? Because I wanted to remind myself it was a window I had open, but it was like really big, and I didn't want it like cluttering up my stuff. And I'm like, I gotta remember to get back to that. And if I just hid it, I know I would just forget that I was in the middle of that big thing. So I minimized it before this podcast. So now I see it sitting in my dock there, and it's going to remind me, oh yeah, I was in the middle of that thing, and I will unminimize it because I'll see it in my dock. That's just one example of me using minimization. And I use minimization very rarely, but I do use it for that one purpose, and I use hiding all the time. So again, I don't know how Windows works, but I think having both of those concepts in macOS is an advantage, and they should keep them.
Yeah, as far as I know, the Windows model is there's just minimizing. But what makes the Mac model powerful, which also makes it confusing for a lot of people, especially newbies to it. But what makes it powerful is that you don't hide windows. You hide entire apps. And you don't minimize entire apps. You minimize single windows. And so you actually have those different layers of management.
You can hide individual windows.
You can?
Yeah. Option click away from it, right?
What? Really?
I don't think I've ever done that in my life.
Anyway.
No, that hides everything.
Let me see if I can find an example. I believe you can, with certain arrangements, just hide one window but leave the others visible. I gotta front and center is thwarting me here.
Yeah, right. Anyway, all right. So while John does that, so basically, like, to me, when I hide an app, it's like, I am done with this entire app right now. I don't need to see this entire app right now. Minimizing, I very rarely use minimizing. The only thing I use it for is Safari. The idea basically is Safari, I tend to have not a John level of windows, but not a small number. Like right now I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have about 12 Safari windows. I got a lot of stuff going.
Gracious.
Yeah.
You got more than me. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6. You have double the number of Safari windows. I have a lot of tabs in those windows. But
I mean, so do I. But for whatever it's worth, like 6 of those windows are minimized and have been minimized for months. I think.
Oh my gosh, you're killing me, you two.
But it's like, here's something, because Safari is like, there's so many times that I have to open something up in Safari and like, oh, I want to deal with this. I can't deal with this right now. I should make an app that deals with this problem for me.
Oh, gosh.
But it's like, I want to deal with this thing in this window. I can't deal with it right now, or I'm not ready to yet. I'll come back to this. And then at some point, like,
clearly that's working well.
It's like the badge on your mail that says 10,000 unread messages.
It is exactly like that. I am equally bad at doing this for all of my applications, but the way I do it with Safari is like, if there's some like project or something that like, oh, I'm not ready for this right now. I don't want to lose these tabs. I can't deal with it yet. But also, every time I open Safari, I don't want all of these windows popping back into view and crowding my entire screen. That's a good case for, I'm going to minimize this window. Also, all the clutter near my dock should remind me of it, over time.
Like the badge on your mail will remind you. Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
I think the thing I was thinking of with single windows is Option double clicking a folder and Finder window, and it will open the new folder window, but it'll close the one behind it. So it's not actually hiding; it's closing it.
So anyway, to answer Michael's question back from 1,000 years ago, why hasn't Apple merged these concepts into one? Well, honestly, they're different concepts. But that being said, this is the kind of thing that like today's Apple, if you look at like, what do we have like on the iPad, like the newest windowing system that Apple has made. Granted, that's still very much in flux, and that's fine. I think they're making progress overall. But modern Apple, I don't think would ever have created this system from scratch this way. But this is something that came from legacy, and I think we're better off for it because the idea of the Mac in today's computing ecosystem is like, yes, this is the computer that like everyone can use, asterisk, but like this is the power users platform. Like if you are a desktop computer or laptop, if you're like a PC or Mac power user, like chances are you're probably a Mac user in a lot of cases. And if you are a power user on the Mac, it rewards you in a lot of different ways you can manage things, including all these different window management styles and techniques and different options you have. Regular people who are not expert users never hide anything. They quit apps or they minimize things. That's it. And that's why regular people have way more minimized windows usually than I have my Safari windows in my little minimized dock area. Or they just close apps with the red button.
Yeah, because they just want it to go away. And like once they learn that yellow button makes it go away to the dock, they just do that. That's why you see so many people with their docks that are just filled with just a huge amount of stuff, so you can't even tell what anything is anymore. Like 1,000 minimized windows or 1 million application icons, because they find that one system. They're like, oh, every window has these red, yellow, and green buttons. And I kind of recognize them, and I learn what they do. And I learned the yellow one makes the window small and go away. And that's the tool I'm going to use to manage my windows. And, if it works for them, it works for them. But there are many more tools at your disposal besides just that. And just using that yellow button can overwhelm things very quickly, especially if you don't understand the concept of like, that app is still running. And unlike iOS, it's not going to quit it for you. Because so many people didn't adopt auto termination. Anyway.
Well, that leads me into my next point, which is I think there's actually two things Apple should steal from Windows in this area. Number one is auto termination. I think number one that
they tried.
When the last window of an app is closed, the app should terminate.
Oh, I strongly disagree.
That is
strongly
optional.
Disagree.
That is optional in Mac apps. And if you're writing a Mac app, you can choose whether you want your Mac app to do that. And I'm glad that's a choice, because some apps, like say Calculator, you do want that, or Dictionary, you do want that to happen. But other apps, you absolutely do not. So the Apple way is better. It should be a developer choice. Developers, unlike automatic termination, I thought you were talking about something else, which I'll get to in a second. But this thing, I believe most Mac developers, including Apple, make the right choice for when they do this. Again, this is a developer choice. You can decide how you want your app to behave. Apple has guidelines on it. They had guidelines back in the day. They still are basically the same. This should definitely be a developer choice, because both modes of operation are important. And you don't even think about, I bet you don't, like Casey, were like, I disagree, I don't like that or whatever, but I bet you never even thought about the fact that when you open Dictionary and close the window, the app quits.
No, yeah, I was fully aware.
Because it just works the way you expect, if what you expect is sanity.
Wow. I think it breaks enough people's expectations that's why it is the wrong behavior.
No, well, and by the way, the other one, the auto termination that I'm referring to, is there's an API that a developer that was introduced years ago, back when I was reviewing macOS 10. Apple introduced an API that said, hey, Mac developers, you know how on iOS, if your app is not being actively used and we feel memory pressure or whatever, like we just kill your app, and then like we'll relaunch it and it has to resume and restore its state. You know how that works on iOS and everybody loves it? Why don't we do that on the Mac? And they introduced a suite of APIs that you can opt into that say, hey, macOS, you can kill my app if you need memory or whatever, and when I relaunch, I'll restore my state so people won't even know, just like iOS. And Mac developers mostly did not adopt those APIs. Is it because it's not the Mac way? Is it because Mac users didn't want it? They still exist. You can still implement them, and I feel like good Mac apps should relaunch to their previous state, but very few Mac apps have opted into allowing macOS to kill them. when it feels like it. And I kind of don't, as a developer of a Mac app, I kind of don't blame them. I know that's just the way things are on iOS, and it always has been that way on iOS, so it's like the culture there. But the culture on macOS is, no, macOS, don't kill me. Don't kill my app. I could opt into it, but I'm not gonna.
See, I think that's very different, though, because that's like the user still has content in a window open of that app. So like that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know, but it is called automatic termination.
Yes. Anyway, okay. So we disagree on that, but hey, and I, as a power user, I appreciate the fact that I have Command W and Command Q doing different things. But I also know that no one else who's not power users ever manages that correctly. So I think termination after the last window is closed, which is something Windows does, I think that is the right move for Apple to do if they ever want to.
I think you should be cursed, Marco, to have your Mac suddenly enable that feature for every app, and it will drive you insane.
Yep.
All right. And then secondly, the second thing Apple should borrow from Windows, John's going to kill me, the green button should maximize the window to the entire screen bounce. Thank you very much.
I mean, everybody wants that. An option green button will almost always do that. Here's what I want the green button to do. And I don't remember if it ever did this, but like there was a button in classic macOS that was kind of the natural analog to the green button. They didn't have stoplights. It was on the right side of the window or whatever, but it was the button looked like a small square inside a big square. Like there was a square and then there was a square in the upper left corner. So it was like little square, big square, right? It was basically like minimize, maximize. And here's what that button did in classic macOS. And it is the thing that I wish buttons, one of the window control buttons did on macOS 10 and modern macOS, but it doesn't and never really did, which is automatically size this window to be appropriately sized for the content that's in it. So, for example, if you're in the Finder and it's an icon view window and you have a bunch of icons and you're like, I just want this window to be big enough to show all the icons. Right now, there's a bunch of empty space all around them. Just shrink to fit. Just shrink it so it fits all the things without scroll bars. That's useful in lots of apps, like an image editing app or whatever, like, or a preview. And, and you want, like, I just want to see this window at 1x. I just did a crop or whatever, but now there's a bunch of gray empty area around it. Just shrink this window to be just big enough to show all the content without scroll bars. None of the, like, apps can implement that. You can do anything you want in response to the window widgets, but that is not a standard feature of the window widgets in macOS, and that's what I miss. I do get what you're saying. I don't mind the green thing go full screen all the time. Most apps do that. If you option green click thing and the app doesn't do that, the option click will usually make it do that. But yeah, there's a lot of confusion with the green thing because some apps will size to fit and people don't want that. They want it to go full screen. I don't actually object to that too much because I do feel like most people see the green thing and they just expect it to do full screen all the time. And I think the culture in macOS these days is most apps do it. Can you think of an app that you use frequently that doesn't do that?
No.
I've never used like the option thing to make an
that used to
be
back when the recommendation was slightly different. The option thing was like, okay, and that will force it. But again, you could programmatically, you can, as a Mac developer, you can make the button do whatever you want, which is insanity coming from iOS, but you can make it do whatever you want. But the defaults and the recommended approaches usually to do full screen. But you said what you want is for it to do full screen all the time. That's what I'm asking. Is there some app that doesn't do full screen with the green widget by default that you use frequently?
Let me see. Hold on. Let me see what Safari does. See, what I don't want is for it to go into full screen mode. That's
you just
different.
want it to make it the size of the... I get what you're saying. All right.
Yeah.
You want it to just make the window big enough to fill the whole screen. You don't want it to go to full screen. But on Windows, it goes to full screen mode.
Full screen, well, sort of.
There's no menu bar,
yes.
so it's harder to tell, but it does.
Full screen mode on Windows, by maximizing a window on Windows, full screen mode, we can call it that, but like on Windows, it's just, okay, now you have one big window. On the Mac, it's a whole show. It's like you maximize, you go, it's like, woo, here we go.
But it does the same thing on Windows in that it doesn't it doesn't leave any gaps or seams. Like it gets rid of the window chrome at the edges. It pushes it off. Like it's full bleed in the print sense, right? Where it's as if you had printed it and then cut. Like Windows does the same thing, and so does macOS. But you're right, the animations in macOS and the whole flashing and everything like that. And of course on macOS it hides the menu bar as well, which is not a thing on Windows in the same way. So
yeah, like it's much more disruptive to the Mac experience to go in and out of full screen mode. And yes, and it is slower because of all the woo animation. So it's like you're getting sent along for a ride. You're like, oh no, I accidentally am in this ride now, and then let me get out, woo, all the way back. Like it's such a heavy operation.
Yeah, try option click in Safari, by the way.
All right, hold on.
Although you will ruin your window when you do this because I don't know how to undo it. Let me see. Option shift click. Nope. There's no.
Oh no, I just got I option click just gives me like the move and resize menu now.
No, option click the green widget.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
When you're not in full screen mode, get out of full screen mode.
I'm not.
Get a Safari window and option click the green widget.
Nothing happens.
What are you talking about? Nothing happens. I just did it. I mean, I'm not on Tahoe. Are you on Tahoe?
No. Why would I be on Tahoe?
That's great.
It's hideous.
I don't. I'm saying I'm Casey. Can you confirm? Go to Safari window and option click the green. I just did it.
It expands vertically to fill the space. It does not expand
it was already
horizontally.
vertically filling it.
Mine expands horizontally and vertically.
Yeah, mine is only doing...
No, I'm sorry. You're right.
It could depend on what web page you're on. Like if you're on a web page...
I think that's
try
right.
ATP.fm.
Oh my God, all right.
This is great programming, John. Great programming.
You may be familiar with. I'm gonna.
It only is adjusting the height.
Yeah, it expands horizontally and vertically.
Not
Yeah,
mine.
mine does horizontal, but only the teeniest little bit.
Anyway, this is the problem though. Like a button like that should do the same thing every time to every window. Like the red button does, the yellow button does, the green button is like, I'm going to randomly make this larger, but not probably what you expect.
Yeah, they're like I said, there's developer control over all these things. Most developers don't mess with the close button or the minimize button, but the green button, as you noted, it's got a menu that comes from it. The option click thing far predates the menu. And the option thing, I used to, in most apps, do what you wanted, which is make this window big enough to fill the whole screen, but don't enter full screen mode. Because that existed before full screen mode was a thing on macOS, because macOS 10 didn't always have full screen mode. So.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what it should do every time. Like it should make the window the full bounds of the screen minus the menu bar and the dock.
But I think a lot of Mac users really love full screen mode, though. So I think the current default is probably right. I don't mind what you're saying. Like I'm not a fan of full screen mode, and I would be just as happy to have it like make the window big enough to fill the whole screen with an option or something. But I mean, I've always said, and this is my complaint forever, there should be public APIs for the windowing system, and things like Stage Manager should have been possible as a third-party app. That's absolutely not the case now, and it's even less the case than it used to be, because macOS 10 used to have all sorts of like hacks and everything, but system integrity protection, everything stopped all that, right? But there should be public APIs for the windowing system, kind of like there was back in the X Windows system. Like I'm sure the Linux people are, if you want a configurable window manager, X11 is sitting right there. It's like, it is, and Wayland or whatever, but and there's lots of cool utilities for the Mac, like Hammerspoon and stuff, where you can hack together stuff that does this. But there should be public APIs from Apple with full access to the windowing system above the layer of an application. So you can, if you want a tiling window manager, third parties should be able to implement one. If someone has an idea that's like Stage Manager, third parties should be able to implement it. If someone wants to make a window manager that behaves the way Marco described, third parties should be able to do that. The wrinkle is that Mac apps can override some of this stuff, but again, that would have to be part of the public API, the public APIs that Apple provide for this. That is a super duper power user feature, though. Like on X11 back in college, I had my window manager configured. I think I've described it before in very un-Mac-like ways, because I had come up with a workflow that worked for me in X Windows on the X terms. It was very different than the way I worked on Macs, like doing, like a focus follows mouse, but without auto raise. So I could be like, move my cursor into a background window and not have it come to the front, but have the input focus be there and stuff. Like I was doing really weird un-Mac-like stuff, experimental time in college. I didn't prefer it all the time, but it was great to be able to configure all of that and use different window managers and stuff. And the Mac, a lot of that experimentation has gone away. And iPad and iOS, it never existed to begin with, although there was a little bit of experimentation back in the jailbreak days. But that is definitely, someday when we do the John Turnus's to-do list, or insert Apple new CEO here to-do list, adding power user features like this to the Mac specifically does make a lot of sense after they shore up all the crappy stuff that's broken with the existing functionality. But yeah, maybe that'll be their new Apple 2030 plan.
All right, thank you to our sponsor this episode, Quince, and thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the perks of membership is exclusive bonus content. We do an exclusive content topic every single week called ATP Overtime. This week, we're going to be talking about the rumor that Apple is making a iMac Pro again with an M5 Max chip sometime soon. We're going to talk about that in Overtime. You can join to listen at atp.fm/join. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
All right, I have a question. What the hell is the story with Thread and Matter? I feel like an idiot. I feel like I am capable of understanding what all this is and means and does, but I don't get it. And I need someone to write up like the Idiot's Guide, or what was that? Thread and Matter for Dummies. I need somebody to write this post and send it my way, please. It might already exist for all I know. But this is all brought on because a year ago now, I bought I believe it's Nanoleaf set of Christmas lights, of LED Christmas lights, so you can program them and you can make them dance and react to music and do all sorts of stuff, most of which we don't bother with. But they were incredibly on sale after Christmas last year, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to get these. I think they were at James Thompson's recommendation. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's true. And so I got this set, and I'm mostly happy with it. And it said that it works with HomeKit. And so I was like, oh, great. Okay, perfect. That's all I really need. Then this year, when I went to put it on the tree, I realized, oh, no. I have now somehow joined the Thread/Matter ecosystem. I don't think I really wanted to be here quite yet. And so I did eventually get it on Apple Home, but that meant I couldn't get it into Home Assistant, which may be user error, or at least not at first anyway. And then I found a Home Assistant add-on plugin, whatever, that would work with it. And so I did get them eventually into Home Assistant, which is good, so I can automate stuff and whatever. But when looking at how to get something over, I think it's Matter over Thread, or Thread. I think that's right. I don't think it's Thread over Matter, but it's something like that.
Mind over matter, Casey.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But when I went looking at, okay, how can I get this connected directly to Home Assistant and then bridge from Home Assistant into HomeKit like I do with so many other things? And one of the things I discovered really quickly was that apparently either Thread or Matter, one of them, requires IPv6, which is all well and good on my physical network, but is a freaking nightmare to get working in a Docker container on a Synology. And so now I'm wondering if maybe I need to get like physical hardware for Home Assistant so I don't need to bother with that whole dance. It's all a mess, y'all. It's all a mess. And most of the reason it's a mess is because I have no friggin' idea what I'm doing. And so I would love it if someone could point me to the Idiot's Guide to Thread/Matter and help me figure this out. And I'm assuming that you two are also clueless.
I mean, it sounds to me like what you need is a guide for getting IPv6 networking working in Docker containers.
Well, that would also work, specifically on a Synology, because my limited understanding after having looked at this very briefly is that doing it on the Synology is uniquely crappy, whereas in general, it's not. I don't think it's ever great, but it's apparently particularly crummy to do it on a Synology. But that would also be an acceptable answer.
Yeah, you engage in smart home stuff a lot more than I do, because your tolerance for futzing with it when when things are not easy or break over time is way higher than my tolerance for it. Like, the extent of my smart home stuff is actually, I believe it's gotten smaller over time.
That's because you're a smart person. I, however, am an idiot.
Like, literally all I have now is Lutron Caseta light switches. And even then, like, I only command them via push button switches on the wall or on my desk. I don't even use voice control with any smart assistants anymore. I have some very basic routines, like for the outdoor lights, turn them on after sunset, like stuff like that. But like, I have very little smartification going on here. And I have a lot of sensors that I can check from YoLink, thanks, John, a lot of sensors like reading data that I can like, look at if I want to know like, hey, is it getting too cold in the house while I'm away on vacation or whatever? Like that's worth, having that kind of stuff. But like actual like automation with integrations between different systems, I'm doing almost none of that. And I'm so much happier for it because every time I would try to set up some kind of automation, it would last maybe a year before something about it would break and I'd have to set it up again. And I'm so tired of like tech, like wheel spinning. Like I'm just reconnecting things that broke that already did at some point work. Like I have no time for that anymore. And I have no tolerance for that anymore. And I got to say, I'm a lot happier for it.
Which I get, and not to be that guy, but in my experience, Home Assistant is one of those things where you have to, and I'm sure I've made this speech before, you have to be able to like see through the matrix, so to speak. But once you can, and once you wrap your mind around Home Assistant, which is not approachable in my personal opinion, and is very weird to set up, but once you can wrap your mind around it, it is incredible. And the stuff that I've set up, the automations I've set up in Home Assistant are bulletproof. Whereas in Apple Home, I feel like I ran into similar circumstances where they would work when they wanted to and occasionally.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much bulletproof in Home Assistant. And that's why for me, Home Assistant is the kind of system of record. And then I will bridge things into HomeKit if necessary, but or I shouldn't even say if necessary. I'll bridge like, lights and switches and stuff like that into HomeKit, but I don't do any automation unless absolutely necessary in HomeKit. And it's worked out pretty well for me. But yeah, I can't make heads or tails, and I haven't really sat down to figure this out. I'm sure I am smart enough, as much as I joke. I'm smart enough, I'm capable enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. I'm sure I am capable of figuring this out, but I was hoping that someone...
You're smart enough to do it. You're not smart enough not to.
That's exactly it. But in any case, if someone has a primer on it, or John, if you're just going to swoop in and save the day for me, that's also acceptable.
I mean, I've used very limited home stuff as well. And by the way, on the Yolink thing, I just had to change my first Yolink battery. So look back on past ATP episodes. When I first mentioned that I got my very first Yolink device, one of the batteries just needed to be changed. So that's how long the batteries last in these things.
It's pretty good.
Anyway, I do limited stuff with home stuff, and like, what do I have? I have one set of lights that I control with voice assistants, and it's hooked up to both my Google Voice Assistant and my Amazon one and my Apple one. They can all turn the lights on and off. I also have physical buttons because it's Lutron Caseta. But I do use voice to do those lights a lot. I have a smart thermostat from, what do you call it? Not Eero. What's the other one?
Nest, Ecobee.
Yeah. Ecobee thing, I use the Ecobee app. It's also connected through HomeKit, blah, 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 but I don't use that. I just use their app. For the Yolink stuff, I use the Yolink app. I don't even know if there's another option that probably Home Assistant does it, but I just use the Yolink app. But I don't spend that much time interacting with these things, and I'm happy that they all just work. And I also have another pre-Yolink leak detector in the basement, which also has its own app, and I just let that be in its own app. For your question about Thread, Matter, blah, 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 my understanding is someone who has really no interest in this and just has a few things in the house that I'm happy they just work and I just don't need to touch them, is that the promise of this one back when we originally discussed it was Thread is basically a wireless networking thing that is not Wi-Fi, that is lower power and is more suited to home stuff and based on, whatever the previous standards that are. But I've experienced miniature versions of stuff like that. For example, Yolink uses a wireless communication protocol that is not Wi-Fi. Lutron Caseta uses a wireless protocol that is not Wi-Fi. But I don't think any of those things are Thread. Thread was an attempt to say, everybody, let's standardize on this home wireless thing that is not Wi-Fi. Because as we all know, having home devices on Wi-Fi is just a formula for tears. It's just the wrong solution to this particular problem. So I don't know how that's going, except that Apple has been shipping Thread radios in all of its devices. So there's Thread. And then Matter was like, oh, you can buy these devices, and this one works with HomeKit, and this one works with Google thing, this one works with that. And like, they'd have to, some devices work with all of them, but then they'd have to write, different software stacks to say, okay, when you're integrating this into an Apple Home, it should do this, but when you're integrating into a Google Home, it should do this. It's like, why are people writing multiple software stacks and potentially also multiple different hardware to support all these different things? And some devices support one and not the other. Why don't we come up with one standard that we can all agree on? And if you make a device that conforms to this standard, it will work with Apple's Home, it'll work with Google's Home, it'll work with the Amazon thing. And that is was supposed to be what Matter was. And as someone who is not into this field, I was waiting for like the day when finally everything comes with Thread radio and everything standardized on Matter, and you could buy any device and it would have reliable Yolink or Lutron style non-Wi-Fi wireless communication with low power and great reliability. It never falls off the network, and it doesn't matter which device you buy because every home device is a Matter device. And listening to Casey talk about using Home Assistant and bridging things into HomeKit makes me think we have not arrived at that world. So the only help I can give you is my vague understanding what Thread and Matter are supposed to bring, and then you telling the story and me thinking it has not arrived.
I don't think it has arrived, and
it hasn't arrived in your house anyway.
Well, certainly not. But I mean, I've also been actively avoiding it. I probably wouldn't have bought these Nanoleaf lights, which I otherwise mostly enjoy. I don't think I would have bought them had I realized they were Thread or Matter or whatever. And I have a couple of friends in my life that I'm sure could set me straight on this, but I haven't had the time to talk to them about it, and we needed an after show, so here we are. But nevertheless, I feel like, as with all things, and I could turn this into an entire different after show. Maybe we should make this an overtime at some point. But I feel like, I was talking with my friend John, who writes channels, earlier today about this. I feel like everything is getting more complicated. Everything in the world is getting more complicated, which I think is a pretty common trend through all of time. And yet, as I get slightly older, I feel less and less equipped to handle and roll with those changes. And I feel like...
Does your fingerprint still work with Touch ID?
Well, that's true so far. Although I don't actually have any Touch ID devices in the house, but that's neither here nor there. But anyways, I lament that as I get older, it's not an instant understanding. Maybe 20 years ago, I would have instantly understood by magic what Thread and Matter were.
No,
but
it wasn't instant. You just had a lot of free time with which to bang your head against the wall and to understand it. It just seemed instant because time flies when you're young.
And coincidentally, that's pretty much what John said to me, is that, back in your 20s, you had all the time in the world. Who cares? But anyways, again, we can explore this and pull on this thread another time. But I don't know. I feel like the world is getting more complicated, and what used to be, just drop something on your Wi-Fi network, which, not to argue with what you were saying, John, I agree with you. But, it used to be, all these things, a Belkin Wemo, which is now dead, or whatever the case may be, just drop it on your Wi-Fi network. It'll be fine. And maybe it wouldn't be fine, but at least it was understandable. And now I have to figure out Thread and Matter, and because of my own potentially poor choices, I need to figure out IPv6 on a Docker container on a Synology.
Maybe Cloudflare can help you. I didn't have IPv6 support from our website until I went to Cloudflare, and they just gave it to me automatically. Done and done.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I've been kicking around, and now we're really off on another tangent, but now I've been kicking around getting like an Intel NUC or something like that to actually host my Docker containers. I have no particular issue with what's going on the Synology, but as I think I might migrate, and we have talked about this, I might migrate away from Synology over the next several years and perhaps just get like a Ubiquity UNAS or something, then I need somewhere else for those smarts to be. And the obvious answer for that is my Mac Mini, but I've had really crummy experience with Docker containers.
Yeah, I don't know if the Mac Mini is the obvious answer. That is not the right tool for this job. But like a Raspberry Pi or, like you said, an Intel NUC would seem much more appropriate than a very fancy, expensive, way overpowered Mac Mini.
Well, sure, but in either way, I say the Mac Mini because it's going to be always on and here anyway, because that's what I like to use for some other things. So logically, it makes sense to put my Docker containers on there, especially because my containers, I'm not going to list them all, but suffice to say that they're generally pretty low need. They'll occasionally get bursty, but they're generally low need. And so it would make sense to put them on the Mac Mini, but I personally have had awful experiences with Docker on macOS. I know that there's some virtualization thing that came with either Tahoe or maybe it was whatever preceded Tahoe Sierra that was supposed to make all this better, but I haven't really tried since then.
Yeah, I'm still using Docker all the time on my Mac, and it's fine. So your mileage may vary. I mean, my Mac is an Intel Mac.
Well, fair. It seems like it's very much the Tahoe flicker that we were talking about earlier this episode, that it's either perfect for you, like it is for me, and it seems to be for you, or it happens all the freaking time. Well, like it's similar, Docker either works perfectly or it doesn't work at all. And
my struggles with Docker are just because of my lack of understanding, but I think the Mac implementation of it, I haven't had any bugs or issues with it. It's updated frequently. It does what I want it to do. But once I switch my main Mac to ARM, maybe that will all change. But yeah, I use Docker containers for all my dev work for ATP. I use Docker. I have my website is in a Docker container, 2 versions. I have my Cloudflare version in a Docker container. I also have my non-Cloudflare cheap shared hosting also in a Docker container so that I can, how when people used to write CMSs back before static site generators. I always feel like static site generators are kind of like just a side door to laziness, because it's like, oh, well, if you want to make your own CMS, of course you have to have a login system and a web interface, and you can edit your entire, like WordPress. It's like you go to the web, all you need is a web browser, and you can go to your website and write a post and post it on your website. And people said, you know what? That seems like a lot of work. How about I just have a thing I run from the command line that spits out a bunch of files and then splats them onto my website, and I'll pretend that by making a markdown file in this Dropbox folder that triggers a bunch of scripts to run, that's the same as having a web interface, right? Well, it's certainly a lot easier, but it also means, hey, what if you want to post to your website, but you're away from your setup? What if, you can't just go to your website to do it? It's like, oh, well, all I got to do is put a markdown file in my Dropbox. But what if you can't get access to your Dropbox? What if you just have access to a web browser? What can you do? And Docker is kind of my side door to that. It was like, worst case scenario, if I have no access to anything, can I get somewhere where I can run a Docker container? Because if I can get there and I can, go there and do a pull request from a Git repo and have things up and running in Docker, and, that's my solution to that. Sorry for the long sidebar there, but yeah, making a real web-based CMS would certainly be easier, but that wouldn't be as easy to deploy in different locations.
So back over here at the ranch, somebody explain thread matter to me, please, because I don't know what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I think my future might be like the easy way to solve this problem is to get either IPv6 working on the Synology or on Docker on the Synology, or just getting a NUC, or Home Assistant sells their own hardware. I think it's either Home Assistant Green or Home Assistant Yellow. I don't recall the differences between them.
Pokemon game?
Yeah, basically. And I think they are themselves either like NUCs or Raspberry Pis by another name, if you will. And I could do that, but my thought is I could just get, a NUC and start using that as my Docker host, and that would take some of the pressure off the Synology. Again, not that the Synology is having problems yet, but I'm trying to potentially divorce myself of Synology, as I really don't like the direction they've gone recently with their hard drive requirements and whatnot. So we'll see, but someone explain it to me, please, and thank you, because I'm lost.